I'm Jethro and I'm the co-founder. No, I'm not the co-founder. I'm the founder. It's all about me. I did this. I didn't do this. I had quite a lot of help. But I'm Jethro and I am the founder of SquashSkills. We're about to celebrate our 10th birthday, and we wanted to give you a little insight into the journey that we've been on and a little insight into the journey we're about to embark on as we go into the second decade of SquashSkills. So SquashSkills started back in 2012. It was a fortuitous meeting between me and my friend who had just started playing tennis. I'd been watching some YouTube videos and fundamentally said, can't we do this for squash? So, back on reflection, some of the early videos, the early attempts were pretty embarrassing. I remember being stood there in his bedroom, really nervous with a can of lager of one shot, trying to relax in front of camera and talk about playing squash in a pair of jeans and a shirt. So that was where the concept came from. We explored it for a little while, and didn't quite work out actually with John in the end. But I was working with Pete through my sponsorship with Prince, Pete Nicol, and then that relationship developed, and eventually just kind of committed to buying a camera. Going down to the court and starting filming some stuff properly. So that was back in 2012. When I look back on those early videos and then the quality of the content, it's pretty ropey. But to be honest, at the time there was nothing out there. I think we were one of the early movers in the online sports space with regards to online coaching. We're very early in that space. And then obviously through the relationships that Peter had and the relationships I guess I'd built up through my playing days, we got instant credibility. So suddenly Peter was able to bring in the likes of John White, David Palmer, Jonathan Power, and that meant people suddenly looked to the platform as this kind of source of truth, especially with the amount of videos that Peter was delivering. So that was really how it all started. What was I trying to achieve? In all honesty, I don't think I knew. There wasn't this grand master plan to create a 10-year business that would go on to, shape squash coaching globally. I think the initial idea was, hey, can we make some innovative videos that help people, and we'll see where this goes. There definitely wasn't a business plan. There definitely wasn't an ideal structure. There wasn't an investment plan. It really was me buying a camera and having a go. I think I realised that there was an opportunity to do something different with squash coaching, and I guess I was probably quite reluctant as well to think about being on a squash court for the next 20, 30 years, being a squash coach, which would have naturally been a progression for me from the playing days. So in all honesty, there was no structure, there was no plan. It was definitely winging it. Unfortunately, there was this kind of gap in the market that led us to where we are today. I think SquashSkills was needed at the time because historically within the sport, unless you've lived in close proximity to a high-level coach, it was almost impossible to get high-level coaching, or unless you were a high-level athlete yourself. And I think what we've tried to do is democratize the game really and make high-level squash coaching available to players of all levels, regardless of where they live and regardless of what standard they are. So you go and look at an England national squad, for example. You need to be of that level to get access to those world-class coaches. What SquashSkills suddenly did was open up access to the world's best players, to the world's best coaches, and give people an understanding of how they played the game, give them insight into their coaching philosophies, let them know what they're thinking about when they're hitting the ball. And I think that was what video and the internet did back in 2012, was kind of open up this idea of not mass market coaching, but creating the opportunity for any player of any standard to get access to world-class coaching. I think that fundamentally was what the driving force and the opportunity became from the creation of SquashSkills. I mean, the initial response when we launched was great. I remember being incredibly excited, especially having been a very poor squash player who'd made no money at all from trying to be a professional player. And then that first day, I think suddenly it was like 40 subs who'd signed up to an annual discount, and it was £100 a sub at the time. So suddenly it was like, wow, there's a load of money coming in. And with retrospectively, actually, that wasn't a crazy day. But from that initial launch was this buzz of excitement. We built the social media channels prior to launch. So I think we had about 15,000 Facebook fans. We'd been putting out some coaching tips, and we built this kind of little community. And then we'd obviously hype the launch, and the squash community is small and supportive, and they just got behind the launch. So there was a real buzz on that day one. We'd obviously ploughed a chunk of cash into setting the website up and recording the content, and suddenly to see that kind of come back within the first week and a half was just, it was just ace. So that kind of set us up. I had a coaching job at the time, and within 2 or 3 weeks, I think I stopped that and said, no, I'm going full time with this. There was enough money to justify keeping going. So yeah, it was a leap of faith, but it certainly wasn't crazy numbers. But then the offering wasn't, with hindsight, wasn't actually that great. It was different. There was access to Peter Nicol, which was at the time fantastic, and I think that was really the game changer. But the website itself, the brand, none of it looked fantastic, but it kind of did the job at the time. So I think the biggest challenges we faced in the early years were not knowing what I was doing at all. I was a squash player trying to run an online digital business and trying to get my head around filming, editing, marketing. Really in the early days I weren't staff, but then it was about managing people, managing relationships, and also just trying to do it on, but completely bootstrapped. There was a small amount of inheritance that I'd thrown at buying a camera and building a website, but literally it was week to week, month to month, the travel expenses, the cost of creating the content, the cost of marketing, design, all of that was coming out of cash flow. So watching the bank balance in those early days was pretty fraught as well, because you just didn't know, are we going to get through the week? Are we going to be able to pay the supplier? So, loads of challenges, and with hindsight would have done it completely differently. But equally, I don't know how easy it would have been to access cash and capital at that point. If you had in 2012 going out and saying, we're going to create an online squash coaching business, I think people would have just laughed at us. So we had to kind of prove the concept in those early days, and that meant that cash flow was naturally tight. Went through a particularly difficult phase with web developers, actually, following investment, and just trying to manage a bad web build can be really, really hard and really frustrating, and that put a huge amount of stress and strain on me personally. And then more recently, obviously, COVID was a shock. We were just getting to a really good place there and a nice upturn, and then COVID happened, and fundamentally we lost 20% of our subscriber base. We've got a decent sized team, 6 full-time staff, contractors. Everybody's wages needed paying, but when you've got a 20% drop off in subscription, it's a major challenge. And then we had 2 years of that. So I think COVID's probably been the most difficult challenge. We worked relentlessly through that period. We never stopped, and we just kept trying to churn out content that was relevant and useful when people weren't on a squash court. I'm sure some of it missed the mark. Some people weren't interested in doing little volleys against their garage door. But then we developed the SquashSkills Training Club, the idea of being able to get access to world-class players and get in a WhatsApp group with them and work with those players wherever you were in the world. Lots of people were in lockdown, but they were able to go and do a home workout, or they were able to get out and do some 400-meter sprints. So I think that was one of the most rewarding things that came out of lockdown, was the way we kind of adapted, despite people not being able to get on the squash court. And it was nice to see the squash community kind of pull together and support us as well, and realise that we were trying to offer something different through that period. But yeah, COVID was challenging for sure, but plenty of other bumps along the way that come with running a small business. With regards to the most important relationships that SquashSkills has encountered, I think fundamentally Peter Nicol has so much to be thanked for. He opened so many doors early on just because of who he was and his status within the sport, and very quickly we got to 8 or 9 world number ones on the platform through Peter's relationships, and then the ongoing relationship with the PSA has also been really significant. The ongoing relationship with Squash TV, the access to that world-class content that meant that we could showcase the best players in the world. How are they hitting the ball? How are they moving? So that Squash TV footage instantly brought the production values up to a completely different level. So I'd say Peter and PSA, fundamentally. And then, our core team, we've got a tremendous team that, we pride ourselves on the fact that we are a real family unit, and the staff have been around for a long time. We don't go through staff quickly. So I think the core SquashSkills team has been, fundamentally really, really important to what we do. And then some of the core coaches such as Gary, Jesse, Lee Drews, the ever presence on the platform. We consistently deliver, great coaching content, month after month. I think they kind of give us the bread and butter and the core of the coaching on the platform, and then that's supplemented by the world number ones, and some of the really huge names in the sport, the Malcolm Wilstrops, the Jonah Barringtons, the David Pearsons, which ultimately give us, what we've got today on SquashSkills. SquashSkills as a business has consumed my life for the best part of 11 and a half, 12 years now. So, there's not a day goes by that I don't wake up and I think about SquashSkills. I go to bed thinking about SquashSkills. It is all consuming, and that's just that's what running your own business is about, right? You live and breathe it. But beyond that, I think it's, I do have a great sense of satisfaction from what the company has done, the number of squash players that it's been able to help over the last 10 years. It's literally in the tens of thousands, tens of thousands of people have got better at squash as a result of SquashSkills. So on a personal level and personal satisfaction, I do feel a great sense of pride around that fact. So it's been a huge part of my life. It's really, really shaped my life. My squash career was cut short as a result of injury, so I never achieved what I wanted to with professional squash. But ultimately, SquashSkills has been a vehicle for me to succeed within the squash world, and then ultimately you're able to give something back along with the team and all the other coaches back to the squash community. So it's huge. It's been a huge part of my life, and it's going to continue to be for the next decade to come. So in terms of the business philosophy, I've alluded to it earlier. We want to democratize the game. We want to make world-class coaching available to all players of all levels, regardless of where they live. And I think fundamentally that's it. We want to raise the standard of squash being played all over the world. We want to give people access to world-class coaching. We want to improve coach knowledge so that they're able to impart better information to their players. We want to spark more conversations. We want to spark new ideas. We want to inspire people to get on court, to go and try new things, to be innovative. There's no one way to play squash. There's no one way to coach squash. And we want to be a melting pot of ideas. We don't conform to one style of play or one way of delivering squash coaching. We want to bring the different coaches from all over the world to the platform, let them showcase their ideas, and then people can cherry pick and they can choose what they want. So, I think the philosophy is democratizing the game, opening up the sport to new audiences, and helping players just develop their game with the help of the best players and coaches in the world. The thing that gets me excited every day is the different challenges that we face, because one minute you're thinking about the type of content you develop, the next is speaking to a national federation about how you could build a relationship there. The next one is with the accountant, just figuring out how you're going to get through the month. Like the role and the variety within what is involved in running the business is the thing that keeps me excited, that keeps me going. And that's underpinned by the fact that I know we're doing something good for the sport. I know we're supporting the community. I know squash players are getting excited about going on court and about trying new things. And I know that we're inspiring a new generation of players to get better. I get very excited about the business. I get very excited about the challenges that we face day to day, and just thinking about how we can improve, how we can make the platform better, and ultimately how we can support our members. So in terms of highlights from the last 10 years, I think the early days, the notion of being a fanboy for the likes of Jonathan Power, David Palmer, John White, Lee Beachels, they were literally heroes as a teenager growing up. And then I used to get very excited about going and filming with those guys and just thinking, wow, this is everything I wanted to do as a kid, and now we're suddenly working with those guys. So that was a super buzz, particularly in the early days. But as time's gone on, I think working with the likes of Jonah Barrington, Malcolm Wilstrop, Brian Patterson, the OGs, and being able to tell some of those stories, the Brian Patterson documentary, seeing the work that the urban programs are doing in the States, completely blew my mind. And then, probably more pertinently, being able to make the documentaries with Malcolm and capture that, just before he so sadly died. I think that was a real moment for me, just being able to showcase the good that Malcolm did and tell that story, because that story deserved to be told at a global level. I think people knew who Malcolm Wilstrop was, but they didn't really get a sense of what he was about. So I think being able to tell that story was awesome. Was so happy with that. And then, as I say, more recently, the rebrand and seeing the new offering come to life is just incredibly exciting. And as I say, getting SquashSkills to the place that I always thought it could go to or could become is now giving me a great deal of excitement too. Picking an all-time favourite is pretty hard, right? Of people that we've worked with, because everybody brings something else to the party. I think the Malcolm Wilstrop piece was great, and spending a good chunk of time up at Pontefract Squash Club was really eye-opening. Working with Mick, just being around for the Christmas party, realising what a sense of community that club has, and seeing how Malcolm, or understanding what made it such an amazing place to be, and understand why it was so successful. We set out to ask the question of what makes Pontefract so successful, and I think at the end of that film we really did understand it. Malcolm's process in a club that was hugely supportive, and being able to unearth that question and answer that question was awesome. So I think that's probably my favourite piece. But then, as I say, the work we did with Brian with the urban squash programs over in the States, that's fantastic. Some of the stuff we did with Paul and Rob Bowen. I think the documentaries became a really, really interesting thing for SquashSkills. Originally, it was all about creating coaching playlists and teaching you how to become a better player. As time went on, we realised that there's tons of amazing stories in the squash world that just haven't been told. Alongside Squash TV, we're the ones with a camera who are able to go out and tell them, and that was through working with James Walker, our amazing cinematographer, being able to go and capture and shoot the content in such a beautiful and wonderful way that then captured the essence of those coaches. So I think the documentaries have become something I really love doing, become really passionate about. I'd love to make more. They're expensive, they're hard to make, they're time consuming, so we're limited to one a year really. But just shining a light on some of those stories that do exist within the squash world, also just being a hugely important thing for me. Yeah, so the first vaguely documentary type piece of content we produced was with Ali, and we were doing some filming on court, and then I just thought, it'd be quite interesting to do a bit of a Q&A off court. So we just sat down and pointed a camera at him and asked him some questions about squash in Egypt, and what it was like growing up within Egyptian junior setup. And we put some music to it in a slightly different way then in the editing process, and I think that sparked an idea that we could go a little bit deeper than just standing on a squash court teaching how to hit forehand drops, forehand drives. And then I think the real transition was when James came to work for us, bringing in his documentary experience, bringing in his cinematography skills that just meant that we could shoot things in a beautiful way and tell these interesting stories. So it was all sparked with Ali. Then it went on to an interview with Hadrian, and then suddenly it was like, right, where are we going next with this? And then we went and obviously made the Do You Know Who I Am interview with Malcolm, which then branched out to the documentary about the urban programs in the States, and to Pontefract a bit more widely with more interviews, more B-roll, and just expanded that, and then up to the most recent one with Rob Owen. So I love delivering camps. They're just a chance to meet our members and to build closer personal relationships. Obviously, being an online business, everybody's behind a screen, but the camps have just been a core part of the business for the last 7 or 8 years. And it's just an amazing experience to go and get 24, 30, 34 like-minded squash nuts all in one place. And generally, if you come on a SquashSkills camp, you're obsessed with squash, and that enthusiasm and that desire to learn just shines through. So, we end up having these 2-day camps in Berlin, Amsterdam, New York, London, and people just come together, and it is a celebration of squash, but everyone's so eager to learn, and the enthusiasm there is mind-boggling. When the pros come and join us, we had Paul Cole recently, you can't get over the sense of enthusiasm and how nice everybody is and the desire to learn. So the camps are just great, and they give us this opportunity to put names to faces and develop these personal relationships. And there are, we'd love to do more of them. They're intensive, they're labour intensive, they take time, but the energy you get off the back of them and the feedback we also get is just fantastic. So I love the camps, and they're just a nice offshoot of what we do and what the core business is. The SquashSkills Training Club was created out of COVID, really, and we wanted to figure out how we could help players keep going with their training, get a deeper understanding of what they were trying to achieve, and commit to 6-week blocks of training. Initially, we started off with just Jesse and Gary delivering them, and then later on we brought in the pros, the top 10 players in the world, and that was unreal, really, because it gave these 30 players that are signing up to the course direct one-to-one access with Ali Farag's, with Paul Coles. They can actually do Q&A and understand what they were doing with their training, and they were just brilliant. And particularly through the 2 years of COVID, some of the messages we got from people who went through the programs were phenomenal. There were a couple of guys who did 12, 13, 14 courses back to back, and they were just talking about how it really helped them with their mental health and helped them keep engaged with the sport, and also they got fitter and healthier through COVID when they were in lockdown, because they had the support of the group. So you had these kind of like-minded individuals all egging each other on, going through the training sessions, sharing selfies, spurring each other on to train harder and push harder. So the training clubs were just like this kind of, I guess, a remote camp in some ways, but over an extended period of time that just built this sense of community amongst the SquashSkills membership. And we're really chuffed with that as a product, and we continue to strive to develop these and just close the barrier between the amateur and the professional game, and just give everybody access again to these insights as to how world-class players, world-class coaches are training and teaching the game. And we're really excited about where that could go. But they were certainly a great product development during the COVID phase that now extends out into a core part of the business. I think the thing that makes me proudest about SquashSkills is the number of people that we've helped. Ultimately, we've literally helped tens of thousands of people get better at the thing they love doing. I think on a personal level, growing this from scratch without having a clue what I was doing, is great. If you had told me that we'd be sat here 10 years later doing this interview, talking about where SquashSkills is now and the relationships we have and the people that we've got on site, I would have bitten your hand off. So just getting to this point, and as a small business, surviving. But fundamentally, it's the proudest thing for me is the number of people that we've helped, and giving people the access to these world-class players, world-class coaches. And then more recently, I guess I'm super excited about the new offering, the new products. Finally, we've built the platform that we always envisaged that we could, and we were always limited by budget, by access to resources. And now I think with the new platform, the new apps, we really are going to make a significant difference. We've got a world-class streaming app that delivers the coaching. It has all the features people have asked us about over years, the ability to download and view offline, finally getting it to the place that ultimately we wanted it to be. I'm going to be very, very proud of the technology solutions that we're offering here, one from a streaming standpoint, but then two from a training standpoint. It's going to be so easy to get on court and go and take a session, tick it off. It's going to be easy for coaches to work with players and manage their schedules, manage their calendars. This was all stuff we talked about in 2015, but unfortunately just weren't able to deliver. We had this frustrating web build, and it just didn't work out. We've been living with that for 7 years. We've produced lots of great content, but I've always felt frustrated by the tech stack. And now the new offering, I hope it's going to blow people's mind. When I'm playing on it and looking at it now in development phase, it's blowing my mind. So I hope people are as excited by it as me. But I think it's a nice timely way to round off the last 10 years. But it genuinely does feel like we're just getting started, if I'm honest, with the new offerings and where we're at. So it was a good first 10 years, but I think the next 10 years is going to be even more exciting.